Okay. Hello, everyone. So everyone who sent me their address should have gotten a package by now. And this is what was in the package, a Sharpie. And I'm going to show you with that in the next video that I'm going to post, because I'm going to post one for ink wash and one for ink line. You will need these little droppers. This will make it easier to drop water and ink into your palettes, the plastic palettes that came in your kit. If you don't have plastic palettes because you didn't buy the kit, I recommend just using like the caps off of any kind of cap. Like this is the cap off of my large ink bottle, something like that, that doesn't have a hole that you can fill, like bottle caps if you have anything like that. Small containers that you can use, but that's why palettes come in handy. You also would have gotten these watercolors. These are handmade watercolors that I made because I wanted everybody to have the same colors. And you can see like some of them cracked. That's because I'm not a professional watercolor maker, but they are good pigmented colors, and I think that I painted with them and they work nicely. So you'll want to just put these aside for now. We're going to use those next week. And some paper. You're going to notice that there's a difference in some of the papers that I sent you. This is all 140-pound paper, but for some reason, this manufacturer, this is Bockingford, this paper is stiffer, better for the watercolor. So you're going to put these aside for now. Speedle's hair is everywhere. That's my black cat. So there's different amounts depending on how much your package weighed. I might have put more paper in there or extra pastels, but everybody's going to have two types of paper. This softer one and this stiffer one. And when you look at them next to each other, the stiffer one is more creamy colored, so this is a warmer white, and this is a cooler white. It's more like a bluish white. So you're going to take one of the softer, cooler, bluish white sheets, and you're going to cut it in half. I've already cut one in half. So I'm going to start out I'm going to show you what you're going to do on each of these. Well, one of them you're going to use for the drawing. The other one you're going to use for exercises. But for now, I'm just going to use a full sheet to show you some techniques that I would show you if we were in class. So if you have tape, I recommend taping down the corners just because it keeps your paper from moving around. I'm taping it down on a piece of what's referred to as gator board, and it's made specifically for taping down paper when you're going to use water media, because it's actually just a thick foam core board so that it doesn't warp with the moisture. We're not going to be using that much moisture, but it's just easy to have it flattened down so that it doesn't move around while I'm filming this. So I think I have to move it over so you can also see these. I gave away all the plastic ones to students who had emailed me early in the semester and didn't have supplies, so I'm just using these ceramic ones that I have that have small contained shapes, areas. So what you want to do, this, you have 12 because you have two that have 6 each. So you want a minimum of like 10 different areas that you can mix wash in, because what you're going to do is you're going to dilute your ink. I have a huge bottle of it, so I poured some off into a little drip bottle. If you didn't have ink and you got a package, you got a bottle like this. So you're going to start out by putting just one drop, well, a squirt, put a little bit more, into one of the trays. And then you're going to have as well 2 cups of water. Let's see if that fits into, yes, that does fit into the picture frame. So, and one of the droppers, hopefully everybody has 2. I was putting in 1 and then I thought I should give everybody at least 2. So hopefully you have 2. If not, you can always just clean it out in between uses in your dirty water. So you have 2 water jars because you want to keep one clean and one you're going to rinse your brush out in, so that if you want to go back to clean water, you'll have clean water here. But you're going to start out by putting some clean water in all of your trays. And one of them, you're going to try to keep it clean with clean water. Like that's your white. One of the things when you're using ink on white paper, it's sort of like watercolor. The white is the white of your page. So if you want white to show, you're going to have to leave that part of your page white. So I'm going to start out by talking about washes. So washes are when you dilute your ink with water, because ink is very dense. Look at how black ink is. So if I wanted this to be a gradation, I could just add some water, but I don't want to dirty these, so I'm going to, well, I can just rinse this out and get new water. But so if I wanted to do a gradation, what happens if I just try to pull down the ink and use more and more water as I go down? It's not going to be that smooth of a gradation, and in fact I'm getting darker there. So let's start back up here. A gradation. You don't have as much as paper as I do, so you're probably not going to want to do this. I'll show you what you're going to do. But you can also see how much water this brush holds as I do this. It holds a fair amount. But you can see those lines. It's not very smooth. Let's see if I can smooth it out by adding more water. A little bit, but the problem is when you add more water, and see how you're going to see all those like marks of where the ink sank in. So if you want to do a wash and you want to avoid that, how do you do that? So what I would recommend is I'm going to take my brush and rinse it in here. And it's kind of nice to have a rag around that you don't care if it gets ruined or dirty, because this ink is stained. I'm going to use this black one. It stains. It's indelible ink. So when this dries, that's going to be a distracting wash if it was something that was in the background. So how do you make a wash that doesn't do that? Well, what I do is pre-wet my paper. It's not very clean, my brush. I didn't clean it that good, because look how dirty my water is. That's why it's good to kind of blot your brush off before you even put it in the water. So I'm pre-wetting this, and right now I have too much water on there. You don't want too much water. If you get too much water, you can pick some up just using a tissue. I'm not going to pick any up because it's soaking into the paper. I might pick some up here where it's beading. But you've seen this for now. I'm going to move it to the side. I'll bring it back when I want you to see it again, because right now I want to pick this up and show you what the sheen is like. See if I can show you. Yeah, see what the sheen is like on there? It's not like running water, but you can see a sheen on there. You don't, well, look, it is dripping. So see how it dripped along that edge? That's more water than I want. So I can blot that up. And so this is kind of a little bit of a preview of one of the other techniques for using texture, because you can pull away moisture. So I think that's already gonna dry kind of fast because it's a warm day. So I'm gonna go ahead. And now what I'm gonna do is I'm going to take just a very small, I'm not even going to like dip my brush in, but I'm going to just pull some of that ink towards the brush tip because it's very intense. And I'm gonna blot some off. I think I have too much, but I'm gonna keep it in this little quadrant. And that looks good. And now I can start. And what this does, it eliminates those hard edges because I already have water on the paper. So I'm more able to get a good gradation. But you kind of have to work fast because once it dries, you'll start having hard edges. And if you think you need more, you can drop in more dark at the top to make a more dramatic gradation. And you can see where the water ends, you get a hard edge. This part of the paper was drying already. And I'm going to go back up here, darker. You might hear my cat crying. I had to put him in the bedroom and close the door because I couldn't even get started. He had surgery last week, so he's been very needy. Hopefully it will be a benign tumor. I should get the results today. So I didn't deal with those edges very well, and what you would want to do is you would want to have your water out farther than you're going to want a soft edge, because whenever you get to the edge of the paper where it's dry and there's no more moisture, you're going to get a hard edge. So that's kind of the difference between hard edges and soft edges and how to control gradations. It's different with watercolor, and I'll do another demo on that. Now that this is drying, there's really not much you can do except add more water, add more ink if you wanted to increase the gradation. But I wouldn't do that until that was dry and then doing it again, because this is a cheaper paper than the other paper that we're going to use for the watercolor. And if you keep putting water on it and rubbing it with your brush, you might start to get a little bit of pilling and damage to the paper surface. So you want to be careful about that. So now that's gradation. So you have a half a page. to do the exercises that I'm going to go to now. So I'm gonna bring these back up. I'm gonna switch this over. Maybe I'll just take this off and put a new paper down. It'll be less confusing. And you can see how the paper buckles a little. And let's see if you can get a sense of how wet. You can see that there's no slick anymore. It's absorbed in and it's drying. So I'm gonna put that aside and get a half a sheet. So for your exercises, my stencils are popping out. You're going to use half a sheet. I'm gonna go ahead and take down the corners without covering too much of my page because I want to get full use of my page. I think I'm only going to take down those two corners. So now what you want to do is you want to learn about diluting your ink and getting different values with your ink. So basically you're going to do a grayscale with your ink, seeing how many values you can get going from the black to the white of the page. So you might like just do little, I'll show you. So you're going to take your first, again, I wouldn't stick my brush in there because you're going to get too much ink on it. I would just take it and pull up a little bit of ink with the tip of your brush, and you're going to put down the blackest black. So this is how black, and if you haven't been dipping your brush in water already like I was, it's going to just be solid black. So I'm going to go ahead and make this my solid black. I might pull up a little bit more ink to compensate for the water that was already on my brush. So that's black. And now I want to wipe off as much of that ink as I can and start. Okay, I'll bring these back into the frame as well. I dipped it in there, dried it, and now I'm going to dip it in there and dry it. And well, I'm going to leave a little bit of water on it. I'm going to pull up some ink from here, and I'm going to go into here, and this will be my next value. I guess I'm sticking my head in the frame. And then if I clean my brush again, and now instead of going back to the original, I'm just going to dip my brush in here and then put it into this one, and it's diluted even more. And now I have a lighter value. Paint a little block of that. And when I'm doing this right now, I can see these like pools of water, and I can tell you what's going to happen. It's going to create a bloom if I don't like keep dispersing that water and letting it dry evenly. And you'll see what I'm talking about when we do the textural blocks. So now I'm going to clean my brush again. And I'm going to pull some of this water out just so that it won't blossom. I'm going to do the same on this one. And you can see it's going to be a little bit lighter, but because of the moisture and wicking, the ink is probably going to get pulled in. You're not going to see it starting to disappear, that lighter spot, and it'll be smoother. So now I'm going to go into this mixture, dip my brush in there, and then put it in here. I'm getting too light too fast, I think. We'll see. And then, yeah, that's kind of light pretty fast. But we'll go with it because you can get so many values. And I guess you should be more deliberate about how much water, like count how many drops you put into each of these, and you'll have a more even value scale. So now I'm gonna dip this back. I'm not even gonna clean my brush because I want to keep as much ink on it as possible. And I'm gonna go to this smaller amount of water, and now we'll have another value. My rinse water is dirtier already than my actual ink. So now I'm gonna now that I have a dry brush, I dried it on the towel, I'm gonna pull a little bit of this moisture out of there. And I'm going to pull a little bit of this moisture out of here. So basically I'm just drying my brush and pulling a little bit of moisture out. And I'm going to redistribute that a little. I might have pulled out too much. That was the last one I did, so I'm just going to get a little bit more of that. And now this one, I'm not going to mess with it. All right, so now I'm going to take this and I'm going to go into here, I guess, because I already dripped in there. I'll take more of that. I dried my brush. I'm going to get some more from the mix. Okay, that's good. Except for that. I don't know what that is. That must just been a piece of dust that got deposited into my palette. So you might want to wipe your palettes before you use them. So now this one I'm going to take and put in here. And dry my brush a little. I think I'm drying it too much. That was this one. I think that's fine. That one actually looks darker than that one because I didn't pull the extra moisture out like I did up there. And you might find that that happens also because you might have residual ink up in here, and when I scrubbed more I noticed that some ink came out again in that, and that's why this one might have been a little bit darker. But I'm going to go ahead and put my brush in that last one that I used, and now go over here. because you can see there's still a value there. And I have a huge jump in here though. What I'm going to do is when I'm done diluting these, I'm going to go back and use that and try to get in between values in there. Looks like I'm getting darker again. Oh no. So here I have a very light value, but it's still a value. So I'm going to go one more, and that'll be 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. This looks darker again. But this gives you an idea of what you want to do in diluting and showing yourself how many different values you can go from the blackest black up to this lightest light, I think is right here. When this dries, it might be lighter. Everything dries lighter than when you're looking at it. But I am going to go in here and see what happens if I just use this dirty water. Do I have something that's in between here? Not really. I would have to go back to here and add some more to this one, the fourth one. I want to at least get one more Speedo's complaining still. Over here. Something like that before you go to that. Anyways, everybody's will be slightly different, so you should do that. Give yourself an idea of all the values that you can get using the ink. And then what you want to do is try to do a couple of boxes of gradation, or about one box of gradation. And I'm just going to incorporate this into that box of gradation. So a box about this big. And what you want to do is pre-wet your paper. And then go to one of your values. And I'm going to start with something like at about this value. Dip the tip of your brush in there. And try to create a gradation. Where you might want to dry your brush and then go to a lighter tray. And start pulling down. That's a bloom. See how that water is going back up and pushing that? If you want to get rid of that, you just have to brush through it. I have quite a bit of water on the paper, but it will help to distribute the ink more evenly. It seems to want to pool at the edges. And that has to do with gravity, the water, the paper's buckling. So I'm pulling away some of the moisture so that I won't get blossoms. Blossoms would create a hard edge. So you're just basically going to practice a gradation. Now you're going to use the rest of your paper to practice some techniques for getting textural values or different techniques in water, in ink washes. So I'm going to start out by cleaning my brush. And it's good not to always be like, you want to have your ink and your water on the same side so that you're not going over your paper with a wet brush, dripping. And also this rag, I had it over here and I keep having to avoid doing that. So now, take some plain water and that's embedded in the paper. Brush it on in kind of like a square, about this size. And you want to make sure that it's not too much. If you look at it, you want it to look like what I showed you on the other paper. And this has a lot more than I want, so I dried my brush a little and I'm taking some of that water away. Okay, I think that's pretty good. And now I'm going to see how much my ink disperses. I'm going to go to this ink that is undiluted. And it's kind of drying because I didn't put too much in here, but I'm going to just kind of charge in here and see how much dispersal I get with this ink. So if I charge more ink, that's called dispersal. So if I put a bunch, it's not a lot of dispersal. And then let's see if I put some in from the bottom here. And if you want more dispersal, you can aid it a little bit. If you just, I'm going to take this next gradation that's more liquidy. And if you just put dots, you can see how much they spread. If it had a lot of dispersal, it would flow faster and wider. Every ink is different, so when you do this, you're going to learn how much dispersal is in your ink. So now I'm going to do a different technique. And for this one, we're basically just going to, let's paint the block with water. And I went right off the edge, so it's going to bleed off the page. Probably better not to do that because it'll be kind of messy. So now I'm just going to put some ink in there so that we have kind of a nice just value. Maybe we'll charge some areas with more color, more ink than others. Let some areas be darker, some areas not so dark. And, okay. I keep sticking my head in the frame. And then you want to take a little piece of saran wrap, and I'm going to make this smaller so that it won't go into that side. I don't want to disturb that so you can see what it dries like. And take some more off. I'm going to place it down on here, and then I'm going to kind of move it around a little. And it's going to give me a texture by drawing the ink into those lines. Okay, moving on. Because we have to let this dry, that's why I'm doing the washes. I'm gonna let this dry, and then when it's dry, I'll show it to you and do the line video, the video using line work. So I'm gonna do another block that has just some ink in it. Again. Maybe this time I'll use a wet on dry technique. And that's where I'm just going to, if I have a really wet brush and I keep the whole space wet, I can, that's another way of getting a gradation, but it's a difficult thing to do if you're doing a large space. So I think that's good. Now, I'm going to look at it, and it has a sheen, but it still has too much of a sheen to do what I want to do. It has to be done at the right time, because if it's not done at the right time, it's not going to work. I'm going to be putting salt on here. If I put the salt on too early, it'll be too wet, and the salt will absorb all the water, and it won't really be able to do what it's supposed to do. If it's too dry, it's not going to absorb any water, and it's not going to be able to do what we want it to do. So I'm going to let it sit for a few more seconds. Let me look at my list of, oh right, so another thing is you can say it's a stormy sky, and I'm going to make this square slightly larger, and using my darker ink color values, and put down so maybe I have this dark sky, but maybe I want to indicate that this dark sky also has some storm clouds in it. So what you can do is take a tissue and just kind of make it into a little wad, and the more creases you have, the more different values you're going to get. And you can kind of punch it in there and pull out ink. The wetter it is, the more ink that will pull out. Maybe I pulled out too much up here, and maybe I want to charge a little more ink into these areas so it doesn't look so blotchy. And anyways, it works better on a larger scale, but you can pull ink out as well. Another way to pull ink out is to use a magic eraser. I'm gonna just kind of tear it, and more spedal here. And if you just drag it through there, it's going to pull some out. And depending on when you do this, it's going to pull more out because it depends on how wet the ink is. You could also cut it into shapes if you wanted and use it to punch out shapes. So the next thing I was going to do is another textural trick, and I need a little more ink. I'm going to take some of this dark ink and make another square. And, oh, actually, I did that one backwards. So I'll use that one to do something else. Oh, my salt. You know what? It might not. It might be too late. We'll put a little bit on there and see what happens. But now this is going to be the salt one because I waited too long. So that works out okay. So this is where we'll do our salt. While we're letting this dry just a little bit, and hopefully I don't forget again, we'll do the cheesecloth. So this is cheesecloth. If you don't have any cheesecloth, if we had been at school, I would have had cheesecloth for everybody, but since we're not, if you don't have cheesecloth and you want to try something like this, you can just use, that one's too big. You can just use some lace, some string. You'll have to just be inventive. This is bigger than I wanted to do, but that's okay. We'll just do that. So you put it down on your paper, and then you pick up your ink and you brush it on. And the reason I'm saying I did it backwards is because, see, I've already stained all that paper, and you can see how here what's happening is that in some areas the ink is just gravitating towards the cloth fibers and not really depositing on the paper. Well, we'll see. So actually the trick is that now we have to just let it dry without touching it. And now on this one, that's ready for the salt. And I'm just going to leave those little bits of that there. So, see, sometimes depending on your ink or what your water medium, the salt trick may not work. We'll see if it works on here or not. It basically just gives you a texture. We're gonna do, that is like a finishing salt. I'm gonna run over and get regular salt after I do another block of ink. And you can see how that piece of cotton pulls in all the ink. Okay, I can't find my regular salt. We'll try this salt again on here when this is not so wet. And we're not really going to know whether that works or not until I end this video and then turn on the cameras to do the video about line work. So one of the things I wanted to mention was that when you're doing something and you want to show texture, another way to do it is to use your dry brush and to basically scrub sort of, and see how the white, some of the white of the page still shows, and that, you know, adds to your depth. Another thing is that when you have some areas that are sort of wet, you can take some darker values and just sort of like drop in more value, and it'll give you sort of an automatic gradation as it pulls, as the moisture that's already there sort of softens some of the edges. So another thing that you can do when you're using dry brush is you can spread the tips of your brush, dip them in ink, and you can do textural values. Maybe you want to indicate there's, I don't know, rows of corn growing in a field, and horizon and clouds. Anyways, so I'm going to end the video now, and when this ink is dry and I can pull off the textured areas, then I will start the video on line work. Okay.